Welcome to F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans. I'm your host as always, Terry, and I'm here to keep you up to date with all of the unbiased, hard-hitting Formula 1 news. So grab your favourite mug of coffee, sit down, strap in and get yourself comfortable to join in the conversation. Because this is F1 Coffee Corner, this is Full Beans, the must-have podcast for all Formula 1 fans. Welcome to another episode of F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans the podcast. I'm your host as always, Terry, and there's only one thing to talk about in this latest episode. Yep, that's right, Andretti Global joining Formula 1. It's dominating the headlines, it's going to dominate the headlines, and to be honest, to try and squeeze it into a little section would be giving this absolutely no justice at all, because this is huge for Formula 1, not just for now, but for the future, and for also other teams looking to come in Formula 1. The repercussions of this decision could have a monumental effect on what the grid looks like going forward. So, without further ado, let's sit down, strap in, and welcome to the Andretti episode of F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans. So, thanks very much for joining me once again. And Andretti, we all heard the announcement yesterday that Andretti Motorsport have finally been given the green light by the FIA to join the Formula 1 grid. That is step one of their bid to come into Formula 1. But it's probably the easiest step. And what I mean by that is, we know that there was 4 teams. We know that 3 of them have been rejected. One of them, Rodin, has been very vocal in their rejection, saying that they felt their bid was up to scratch with Andretti's, financially viable. But it was always about getting Andretti into the Formula 1 grid, which is quite interesting, because Andretti's been harbouring this for so long. This isn't a new thing for him. It is something he's been dreaming of doing for a long, long time, to go toe-to-toe with the most prestigious sport in motorsport, Formula 1. Now, I know there'll be some IndyCar fans coming for me, probably some NASCAR fans coming for me, but Formula 1 is classed as the pinnacle in terms of motorsport in general. So please, don't come at me for that one. Every sport in their own right is, or every fan in their own right, I should say, classes their sport as the pinnacle. But Formula 1 certainly is up amongst the top motorsport events, if nothing else. But what does this all mean? Because what's next? So the FIA have said yes to Andretti. They put out this statement which talks about the sustainability, talks about the bid, talks about what Andretti were looking at doing, talks about how they fit with their plans going forward with, their net zero targets, all of the other things that, from the FIA point of view, tick a box, and then, kicked it down the road to pretty much FOM, Liberty Media, to say, right, your turn next, to which they promptly put out a statement saying, thank you very much, and what we will do now is we will look at the bids and see if it can get in on its own merit with us. Which is quite interesting that you've got to pass the test twice before you can line up on the Formula 1 grid. But what does it all mean? Because ultimately, that's what everyone wants to know. We've all seen the headlines, but does that mean that Andretti are in Formula 1? Not yet is unfortunately the answer. Now, I just want to start this whole podcast off by saying, from a personal point of view, I am a Formula 1 fan first and foremost. I want Andretti to be a Formula 1 team on the grid. I want 11 teams. I want more competition. It can only be good if there's more competition. It's, if you're a fan, how can you say no to competition? Ultimately, what this all boils down to, though, is money. And this can play out in a variety of different options, which is why it's going to be really interesting to see which route this goes down, and why, when I said it could have repercussions for Formula 1 in general, this is what I mean. So what's next for Andretti? What does the bid involve? Well, the bid involves an all-American Formula 1 team with a base set up in Europe and an American driver, pretty much is what the Andretti bidding includes. So Colton Herta will be a sure odds-on favourite to take one of the Andretti seats, providing they get approval pretty anytime soon. Got a super licence, already driving for Andretti in IndyCar. That is a most sensible move for Andretti to put as one of the seats taken up. That would leave the other seat very much free to negotiate with one of their partners, whoever they're going into. Now, in terms of partners, we know they're coming in with the Cadillac brand, which is obviously part of General Motors. Now, the misconception here is that General Motors are providing an engine, or Cadillac are providing an engine. They're not. It's actually an engine provided by Alpine and rebadged as a Cadillac engine. So probably very similar to the Alfa Romeo Ferrari engine, where it's a Ferrari engine but it gets rebranded as an Alfa Romeo engine for the Alfa Romeo team. So it's the similar setup. It's already in Formula 1. It already happens more than we think, because ultimately when you've got the the 2026 regulations, you've got your engine suppliers locked in. Now, the team's already locked in. They're already developing those engines. They're already in an engine cost cap. So Cadillac can't join in that 2026. They can join later on, which I believe is the plan. The plan is to come in with an Alpine engine, and then ultimately you would bring Cadillac into Formula One by helping design engine a few years down the line, whilst working in partnership with someone like Alpine to do that. So that is the initial plan for Andretti, and an all-American team based in Europe, which will also help them with things like their Formula E, other events that they've got over in Europe. They want a hub, so similar to Haas working out of Banbury and working out of Maranello as well. Haas have got offices there, so a similar sort of hybrid setup where you've got this base in Europe where you can consolidate everything, keeps your costs down, but you're also fundamentally answerable to America. So that's the plan for Andretti. Now, what's the next step? So the next step and the stumbling blocks. The next step is to negotiate, like I said, for the commercial rights with Formula One management, or Liberty Media, as they're most commonly known. Now, this sounds very easy because on paper, Liberty Media would want an American Formula One team. Why wouldn't you? It's going to boost the value of your business up. It's going to boost the commercial aspect up. It's a market they've been, trying to get as much money out of for a number of years now. That's why we're going to Vegas. That's why we've got all of this hype around the American Grand Prix, because they realise it's a market, it's a target market for Liberty Media. So surely an all-American Formula One team with an American Formula One driver absolutely ticks their box. And it does. But they're not the problem. The problem is, as Rodin described it, the Rodin owner described it in his press release, he talks about how it's quite funny actually, but Formula One have been letting the inmates run the asylum. So basically what he's alluding to is the teams have all the power, and why would you do that? And that's what the real issue is. It's the teams. It's not Liberty Media, but it's the teams, and how much Liberty Media are willing to go against those Formula One teams. And ultimately, they need each other to work. It's a partnership that's, stood the test of time with the Concord Agreement over many years, obviously pre-Liberty Media. The negotiations last time went very successfully, very quickly, very smoothly. And what Liberty Media don't want to do is rock that boat, especially with the new one coming on board in 2025. So they want to make sure that this current Concord Agreement that's about to run out, where we're about to start negotiating, go through very smoothly, because the teams can make it very difficult, and they can also make it a very costly experience for Liberty Media. And this is why they're so hell-bent on working with the teams rather than welcoming Andretti in, which to the outside world looks a bit of an ass about way, is probably the best way to describe it. That why would you do that? But ultimately, for the Formula One teams, it comes to money. It comes to their share of the pie. At the moment, all of the commercial rights, they're divvied up and divided by 10. They're not equally divided by 10, I must add, but they are divided by 10 in an arrangement that served Formula One the test of time, which the teams, whilst might not all be overly happy with, certainly agree to and are fine with it. Now, by adding an 11th team into it, you're diluting that pot of money by 11 instead of 10, because there is no more extra money by adding 11th team in. There may sound like there is, but there's not, because the Concord Agreement won't allow for that. It allows for the same amount of money to be divided by 11 rather than 10. So to offset this, the teams put in what's called the buy-in clause, which we keep hearing to in the press, which is the amount of money that a new team coming into Formula One has to stump up to compensate the teams for this loss of earnings. In this case, the Concord Agreement says it's $200 million. But this was signed in 2021. It's not a recent thing. Now, we all know what's happened to Formula One since COVID, lockdown, 2021, Drive to Survive. There's been this huge spike, this massive boom. Now, I know recent reports say it's pillaring out and actually it's not as high as it was. It's still record high. It's still one of the highest it's been. Commercially, it's still a lot more than when that Concord Agreement was signed in 2021. And the teams know this. So this is where they've got their hold over Liberty Media. This is where they're actually stating, we want more money. Now, they're quoting sort of buy-in for Hockey League, so the National Hockey League, basketball. They're saying it should be around the $500 million mark as a starting point. There's even quotes that it should be as high as $600 million to compensate for them. Now, this pot of money is divided equally amongst the teams. So if it was $500 million, each team would get $50 million, and that's their compensation for losing a slice of the pie. That's what they get for it. But what the teams are saying is that's not enough, because commercially they're going to lose out over the upcoming years because of the boom that Formula One's enjoying. Liberty Media, the common perception would be, why not just increase the price and why not increase the money going to the teams? Well, because ultimately that eats into Liberty Media's profit, and they don't want to do that because they don't care about the team's profit. They care about their own profit. That's what they're here for. They're not here for Red Bull, Mercedes, Aston Martin, and Ferrari's bottom line profit. They're there for their own profit. They've got their own shareholders to keep happy. Now, if they start giving millions away in prize money, the shareholders are going to be like, well, where's the business sense of that? Because that's what this is. This is a business. To Liberty Media, it's a business. Let's not fool ourselves in thinking, they're patrons of the sport. They've got the best interests of the sport at heart. Ultimately, they're running a business, and an 11th team in, if you increase the prize money, reduces their profits. And that's why they're not keen on this idea at all. Now, that leaves us with this complete stumbling block over what on earth happens now. Because the FIA, very cleverly, they're allowed 12 teams under the Concord Agreement. So they kicked it down the road, basically, to Liberty Media. They've gone, we've done our bit. Andretti's passed the bill. Off you go. We're now the good guys. We said yes. We're happy with the fans. Fans love us because we've said Andretti can come to Formula 1. Now, you be the bad guys who say no. You be the ones who say they're not coming to Formula 1, and you deal with the fallout from it because we've done our bit and we said yes to it. And that's effectively what they've done. They've gone into a very public showmanship of saying to Liberty Media, if you don't want Andretti to come into Formula 1, you're going to have to be the ones to say it. You're going to have to be the ones to tell the fans that they're not coming. Not us. Not, Mohammed Ben Salman. No one like that. This is all on you. And it's all on you and it's all on the teams. And why wouldn't you want it? So they're forcing this very public show of pressure to put on Liberty Media for them to accept it and have Andretti coming into Formula 1. Now, Andretti's talked about this quite openly. He's talked about how it's pure greed from the Formula 1 teams, how it's just, fundamentally about their money and nothing else. And it is. He's not lying. Everyone knows it. Anyone who's a fan can see it. But that doesn't solve the problem, does it? Just because he's highlighted what the problem is, highlighting the problem doesn't solve the problem. He needs to come up with a solution. Now, there are only a few solutions available to Andretti in terms of coming into Formula 1 now, because they need the teams on board. They need the majority. We've got 10 teams. 8 are against Andretti coming to Formula 1. The 2 that are for Andretti to come into Formula 1 are Alpine because of the engine deal, so they stand to profit from it. And also, you've got McLaren due to their various tie-ups in other motorsports who have naturally come on board and said, yeah, we're fine with it. Even if they probably not in terms of the profit, they've got far too much other commercial interests and far too many other tie-ups who got that boot. So they've come out and said, yeah, we're fine with it. The other 8 teams have said, no, we're not fine with it. And until they can be convinced otherwise, Andretti won't be able to get that hold on Formula 1 that they want in terms of getting into Formula 1, because the teams will hold Liberty Media to account. Now, to get around this, there's a few options. First and foremost, Andretti needs to get his paycheck out, and he needs to get his checkbook out, and he needs to literally write a check for what the Formula 1 teams are demanding. But when you start quoting 500, 600 million, you start to see a very different business model that's proposed. If you're coming to a Formula 1 team and you've based your money on a 200 million buy-in, to then start to have to write a check for 500, 600 million before you even enter the sport is a lot more money than what was in that proposal. Suddenly that financially viable, sound business plan that you had doesn't look as financially viable when you've got to go back and address shareholders and talk to them about, we gave you this plan which said, here we go, it's going to cost us 200 million, but actually it's going to cost us 600 million or 500 million, whatever the price may be. So in order to do this, he's then also being held ransom by the Formula 1 teams. Now, anyone who knows Andretti will know that he doesn't like that idea. He doesn't like the idea of having the Formula 1 teams having a hold over him and making him pay over the odds and holding him to ransom. It's not something that's going to sit easy with him. And this is where it's going to become a complete way up between do you think that in terms of, is what's more important to him? Because that's what this is going to be about. What's more important, entering Formula 1 or actually saving face with the teams and pride ultimately? Because if you're paying over the odds to come into Formula 1, you're already on the back foot. When you start to try and negotiate things, the teams know they've got your number. They know that they've got you rattled. And The teams don't want more competition because ultimately that dilutes their prize money. If they have more competition, then there's less chance of getting podiums. There's less chance of finishing as high in the standings. Andretti are a global brand. They win at pretty much everything. So from them to come into Formula One, they're not coming in to be backmarkers. They're coming in to win, and that's going to upset your Aston Martins, your Ferraris, your Mercedes, even your Red Bulls. Certainly your likes of Haas, because they want to move up that table, they want to move up that grid, and they want to win in Formula One. And suddenly, if you go from 4th to 5th because an 11th team's come in, that's going to hit your prize money as well. So you're getting hit at all these different levels financially, which the teams don't want. There's nothing in it with them. They are making enough money. What the budget cap has done, the cost cap, what it's done is it's made teams more financially viable. So they're not hugely bothered about the money in that sense because they make money off Formula One as it currently is. So giving them 50 million to come into Formula One may sound a lot, but to them it's not really, because we're making more than we've ever done. We've reduced all our overheads because of the cost cap, so we're now in a financially more viable position, and therefore by doing this we're already making more than what we were before, so we don't need 50 million and diluting our money. Why would we go for it? So what other options are there? So if Andretti doesn't want to pay the money, what's left? So he can either pull out and have egg on his face, or what he can do is he can look at what I've been talking about for quite a while now, since a few months ago, which is buying Alpine. Now, on paper, this looks like the most ridiculous thing to do in the world, because why would you go and buy a Formula One team when you've just been approved to be the 11th team on the grid? It makes no sense, but it does make sense. It makes perfect business sense. Now, Alpine would be open to looking at selling off the end zone facility. So not the engine part, the chassis part, the end zone facility, keeping their factory in France and making the engines and still supplying Andretti those engines and still being in Formula One as an engine supplier. Something they've done before in the past. They've done it with Lotus. Renault are notorious for doing this, for backing out and then coming back and all these sorts of things. So it's not new to them. They would sell the facility on, it would give Andretti their base in Europe, and they would then supply Andretti with the engines, rebadge them as Cadillac, everyone wins. And also, FOM and the teams win, because it would cost Andretti around the same amount of money as what his buy-in would cost. Possibly even less, because you're only buying the chassis side, you're not buying the engine side of Alpine, so it would be considerably less. It's already got an American investment group on board at Alpine. Ryan Reynolds' group, they brought into Alpine, remember, not so long ago. So you would only need a controlling stake with them in as partners. So again, that brings that cost down that little bit more, because you're not buying 500 million's worth of shares, you're only buying 360, for example. So you're saving money. Then you've got the facilities ready to run. You already are in the Concord agreement because you're taking over an existing team. So we know that it's a surefire vote, because the teams would agree with that. Why wouldn't they? So the teams would then agree on that. You would then become part of Formula One. You'd be able to come in instantly, so you wouldn't have no delay. You could take over the current chassis, you could rebadge it, you could literally have a car on the track for next year labelled as in Andretti. It wouldn't be a problem at all. So that would start getting that income in a lot more quicker, because you haven't got this delay. Now, this delay that we're going to see from probably FOM and the teams is going to be a big factor, because while all this keeps dragging on, you're not in Formula One, which means you're not making money. You can't go out and get sponsors. You can't go out and sort those commercial deals out, because you haven't got the authority to do that. So they may have like title sponsors lined up, that side of things, but they won't have these commercial deals lined up that they will have if they brought someone like Alpine. Now, they would also save face. So what he would be doing, he would be giving Alpine the money rather than giving the Formula One teams the money. So in a pride sort of way, it would save face. And like I said, the teams would fall over themselves to ratify this. They would say, yeah, that's no problem at all. You come on in. We're not bothered at all about that, because our prize money remains the same. You become a 10th team on the grid. Everything goes back to how it is. Concord agreement will go through next time, no problem at all. And we're not going to object to that. So that is why I still think that Andretti to Alpine is still a deal, even though we've seen this statement from the FIA, even though we've seen this very public statement that says it's now up to Liberty Media. And it would also solve the problem that Liberty Media have in terms of dealing with the teams and Andretti coming in. That's just my thoughts. That's just my sort of rambling on the Andretti coming into Formula One. And it was far too long to put into a TikTok video. It's far too lengthy to chuck into 3 minutes, hence why there's a podcast on it. It is only a short one. It is only an Andretti special edition. If you do get a moment, hit those like buttons, hit those subscribe buttons, because they mean the world to me. And it also helps with the podcast, getting it out there, because I haven't done this enough and I need to do it a lot better. So yeah, that one's on me. But if you've enjoyed this episode, hit the like buttons, hit the follow button, share in the normal way, leave your comments. And I just want to thank everyone for listening to F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans, the Andretti edition. Catch you all soon.